Hey, friends. Whew. Um, so I had as is, I suppose, no surprise, I had a kind of series of thoughts today or insights. Um, I spoke about it in my post yesterday, kind of getting sucked down. I call it getting like sucked down the rabbit hole, or just getting basically to this. I sometimes call it the eye of the needle moment in a project. And virtually every creative project I've ever done has one or has several. And, so yesterday, if you didn't see my post, I was basically just describing a day when I was basically pulled into a state where I lost myself at the expense of this project. I lost my own orientation, my own kind of core. Not for too long, but certainly for enough time that it sort of manifested in my relationship with Katie and the way that I was with Annalise yesterday evening. And I felt like I would never get to the end of this thing if I didn't just go in and like kind of go all in. And what I found was, so there's a series of revelations came out of that. One I sort of spoke about yesterday, which is just that even though that was happening, I also felt a sense of, it was like an unease, a discomfort, which I actually think is a really healthy thing to feel, because it's an unhealthy state. So to feel the discomfort of being pulled off center, to have the feeling of being pulled out of my center or of giving up my priorities, to have that feel negative is a sign of health. And so I took it that way yesterday, even as I was still sort of like not quite fully feeling like I'd returned to center. I sort of appreciated the discomfort that I was feeling, because it indicated that I generally don't reside there. That it indicated that I generally am more in the zone, So that was one takeaway. Another one, which came to me through a conversation with Katie, was a really big one, which is basically that in order for that to happen the way it did yesterday, in order for me to get pulled off balance in that kind of a way, and in that significant of a way, I have to undervalue myself. Because what's really happening is I'm making the project bigger than myself. I'm making it somehow have more importance than what I know is most important to me. So it becomes this thing where I give up what's most important to me because I presume somebody else out there has the answers, has a better answer. And then what then happens is the people that with whom I'm in relationship, and especially someone like Annalise, for whom I am a formative figure, they don't necessarily receive, "Oh, Papa is undervaluing himself right now." They'll receive, "I'm not valuable." they receive the emotional lesson that I'm experiencing. And just clocking that is big, because I've known this. This is not something this isn't like a new insight, but it's something that it kind of just keeps being illustrated, and especially when I have kind of intense moments of events like this where I feel that thing happening. It's just kind of big to recognize that and to realize, oh, right. I'm not teaching, what I'm teaching is like, I do that I undervalue myself, and then I undervalue the people I love from that same place. And what Katie pointed out, we were talking about it, and she pointed out that, of course, it doesn't feel good to her. Of course, it's incredibly unpleasant to feel someone not valuing you, or to have me kind of like falling down a rabbit hole of something else feeling so much more important than my family, right? And that's not a pleasant experience. But she was wise enough to be able to say, but I know you're doing it to yourself first. So that means that whatever's coming out at her is not really about her. It's not that she's not being valued. It's not that I'm not valuing her. It is, but it's coming from a place that's more fundamental. And the fix for that is not for her to assert her value to me and say, this is bullshit, this is what I need. It's more to recognize what's happening in me so that can be healed, so that then what I communicate will be this other thing. This, will be the truth, which is that I value her and Annalise more than anything in the entire world. So that was a very, it felt like a very key insight to have around all this, because it takes it from the level of, oh, this is a part of a thing that happens in the creative process, and it's a eye of the needle moment, which it certainly is. That's true. But then you have to ask, well, what does it mean? How do we navigate those moments? Do we have to get pulled off center every time there's an eye of the needle moment in a creative process? Do we have to? No. My general experience is that when a project is really stretching us, there will be at least we'll at least have to resist the tug of that. If it's easy for us to not feel that, or if we're just in a place of such integrity that the project we're doing remains under our command, that's great, But oftentimes I feel like when I'm growing to a new level, there's at least the risk that will happen, because it's new. There's a new level of complexity that I'm trying to absorb and integrate and navigate, and it scrambles my system for a minute. But even as I say that now, I'm wondering, maybe that's kind of a bullshit reason. Because like, if I imagine, like what would a Chogyam Trungpa say to that? Chogyam Trungpa, who wrote this book, which now that I've finished his first book, I can start his second book, which is all about Dharma art. It's basically creative spirituality, like the thing that I've been talking about for months. It's basically that, but from the perspective of his tradition and his artistic discipline, and his from how he sees things. And it's, I would imagine that a new project, even if it is a bit overwhelming, here's the problem with it. I think I figured it out. The problem is what I just said, which is that as a project stretches us, we run the risk of falling into this rabbit hole of making the project more important than ourselves, more important than our highest priorities, right? That's the thing I'm diagnosing. That's the thing that happened to me. That's the thing I'm diagnosing. If that happens sort of sequentially in a series of, it may potentially ever expanding, so we do a project and then that happens and then we get used to it and then at this level we're okay, and then the project then we jump to a larger project and it has the same effect, but then we eventually get used to that level, and then that looks like growth, and in fact it is growth, but it's also to presume that we have to get pulled out of integrity is to presume that our self-worth can only grow incrementally, never infinitely, never holistically, that our self-worth never comes off the table as a bargaining chip in all of this. And I don't think that's true. I think our self-worth can and actually must come off the table. It must be something that can be infinite, and that therefore it doesn't matter how big the project is. It doesn't matter that we've gone from one level to another level. Our self-worth is not challenged by the larger level because our self-worth is beyond that. It's not, oh, let me work on this project so that then my self-worth can climb up to this level. That presumes a kind of hamster wheel relative, it's still growth, but it's very limited growth. And it's growth that is circumscribed by the circumstances in which it finds itself. It's not growth on the most infinite cosmic level, which is available to us all the time, whether or not I'm doing a project at this level or that level or this level, or am I going to let the size and scope and how am I going to let my ego's notion of how important a project is determine my self-worth? That's a recipe for insanity. So, yeah, that's kind of where I've come to in reflecting on yesterday and in getting some very kind words of wisdom from my wife, and then kind of processing it over the course of today and thinking this through. Because I think our self-worth is infinite. That's what we're claiming. That's what we're really claiming when we do this work. We're not looking to ratchet up our self-worth. One step at a time. Now I'm worth this. Now not that never happens or that that's even bad. It's just I don't think that's the whole story. Yeah. Thank you, folks. Appreciate you. Love you. Conversation means everything to me. Insights like the one I just had happen to me because I speak to you. It's amazing. Thank you so much. Love you. Bye. See you tomorrow.